From the curb our house looked like a magazine spread, white shutters, trimmed hedges, a brass knocker polished until it blinded you at noon. Neighbors waved and said we were the kind of family you hope to live next to, as if quiet lawns proved anything. Inside, silence did more work than any chore chart. My father believed feelings were an unruly species that should be hunted to extinction. He spoke in briefings, not conversations. If you cried, he checked his watch. If you bled, he checked the carpet. My mother arranged the world like a centerpiece. She ironed napkins for taco night and reposed fruit so the colors graduated from lemon to plum. She could catch a reflection in a teaspoon and fix her hair without breaking eye contact with you. If there was a choice between comfort and presentation, presentation won in a landslide. People are watching, she'd say, even when it was only us. Especially when it was only us. Janelle glided through that house like it had been built to her measurements. Teachers called her poised. Coaches called her a natural. My parents called her a gift, which made me feel like the card that came with it, polite, dispensable, quickly misplaced. When Janelle forgot a science poster at home, Dad drove it across town and apologized to her teacher for the mix-up. When I came down with a fever before my piano recital, Mom said, "Drink water, don't ruin the program." I played with my skin buzzing and the keys tilting under my fingers. At intermission, they told me I was brave. Later, they told me I was dramatic. It started early, the calibration away from my own body. At 7, I said the dog next door scared me because he growled through the fence. "He's friendly," my mother cooed, ushering Janelle to pet him for the photo while I hovered at the edge of the frame. At 9, I told my father the swing set chain pinched my palm. "Grip harder," he said. When I held up the blister later, he asked why I hadn't washed my hands. Janelle's jokes were always, lighten up, jokes, the kind that require an audience and a scapegoat. Salt in my cocoa. To see if you'd notice. A hidden alarm set for 3 a.m. Just for laughs. I noticed. I woke. I cried. The verdict never changed. Overreaction. Sensitive. The word settled into me like a second skeleton, one that clicked and ached every time I reached for help. We took family photos on the front steps twice a year, spring and fall, the seasons of pretending. The morning after Janelle, accidentally, locked me in the hall closet for an hour, I stood between them holding my breath so my face wouldn't wobble. "Smile with your eyes," Mom murmured. Dad's hand rested on my shoulder like a paperweight. Janelle leaned in, glossy and sure, the light catching her hair just right. When the prints came back, we all looked perfect. No closets. No thudding heart. No small fists tapping wood and counting to 60, again and again, to keep from screaming. I learned that peace in our house meant agreeing that nothing had happened. If you could swallow a hurt whole, and never let it show on your face, you were called mature. If you asked for a bandage, you were performing. I kept the wrappers from the few bandages I earned and lined them in a drawer like ticket stubs. Proof that once, briefly, someone believed me. I wasn't born into their house, but some summers it felt like I lived there. Guest towel folded to a knife edge, a cot in the office that smelled like lemon polish, a note from Aunt Elise about quiet feet. From the sidewalk, they were flawless. Inside, the rules were written in air. Don't bleed where people can see it. Don't name what hurts. Keep Janelle shining. I watched the way approval moved, a sunbeam Janelle could step into whenever she pleased. She had a talent for laughter that needed a target. "It's a joke," she'd say, tipping a fistful of salt into Ava's cocoa while the adults busied themselves with hors d'oeuvres. Ava sipped, face folding, and everyone waited for her to make them feel better about what they'd made her swallow. "Oh, honey," Aunt Elise would sing, "a little salt won't kill you." Janelle's smile earned a pat on the shoulder. Ava's grimace earned a lesson on gratitude. It didn't look like cruelty, not if you squinted. A hallway closet. By accident. Ava's muffled knocking became drama, because the roast was almost ready and laughter was easier than keys. When she came out with the imprint of the door edge scored in her cheek, Uncle Matt asked why she'd been hiding. She learned to make a joke of it herself, because the quicker she laughed, the quicker the room stopped looking at her. The alarms were my breaking point. Middle of the night, the house split open by a shriek at exactly 3. I reached the hall as Ava stumbled out, hands over her ears, and Janelle leaned against the banister, whispering, "SHHHH," like she discovered music and wanted to conduct it. In the morning, their mother said, "If you went to bed earlier, you'd sleep through anything." The next night, there were 2 alarms. I was 11 when Ava showed me her palm, a puddle blister where the swing chain had chewed it. She asked if it looked bad. It did. "Grip harder," her father told her from the porch, not looking up from the sports section. I found a bandage in the bathroom, the forbidden kind with cartoon faces. She let me stick it on, and we both stood there like we were stealing something that belonged to someone else. The thing I remember most is how quickly belief moved away from Ava, as if it were scared of catching something. If Janelle cried, the room rearranged itself to fit her sorrow. If Ava did, a clock started. "Take a breath, don't make it bigger, people are watching." When she laughed too loudly at her own jokes, I understood it as a life raft. Float or sink, your choice, but do it quietly. By August, I could feel the house teaching me its arithmetic. Janelle plus mischief equaled charm. Ava plus pain equaled performance. I wanted to say it out loud, to put the wrong answer on the chalkboard just to prove the numbers were rigged. But the air in that place made truth heavy. We ate our cobbler, we complimented the crust, and later in the guest cot I listened for hidden alarms, counting the spaces between, practicing the kind of silence that keeps you welcome. I met Ava after all the big noises of childhood had gone quiet. She taught 4th grade across the hall from my 7th, and the first thing I noticed was how she moved through a classroom like a person tiptoeing around glass. Nothing clattered in her wake. She kept extra pencils in a mason jar, and a soft voice in reserve for the kid who flinched at bells. The kids loved her because she noticed what didn't announce itself, chewed sleeves, the way a smile could be a shield. On Tuesday she left early for therapy. She didn't say the word at first. "An appointment," she called it, the way you might mention a dentist without naming the drill. Later she admitted the office had a window facing a brick wall, and she liked it that way, no view to pretend for. She came back carrying small, invisible adjustments. Little boundaries you could stub your toe on if you weren't paying attention. She said no with a smile that didn't beg for forgiveness. Peace with her was built like a bird's nest, twig by twig, patient, a fragile architecture that somehow held. We walked after work past the bakery that burned its loaves on purpose because people asked for more crust. She laughed at that, burned on purpose, and then didn't for a few steps, thinking of something I couldn't see. Nights we cooked the kind of dinners that let you eat with one hand and grade with the other. She slept with a fan on for the ocean noise, said she needed the cover. The phone call came on a Thursday mid-May, just before dismissal when the hallway hum was about to crest. I watched her eyes go hard the way a lake goes still in wind. "Janelle's party," she said after, like a sentence you have to serve. "Milestone birthday. Backyard thing. It would mean a lot if you came," her mother had told her, which was how demands wore pearls in that family. We sat in my car with the air off and the doors open, heat slouching in. She traced the seam of the seat with her thumb, a habit when the past leaned close. "I can say no," she said, like she was testing the shape of the words in her mouth. Then, softer, "But if I don't go, it becomes a story about me. You know how they tell stories." I did. I'd heard the scripts, the revisions that made bruises into lessons, and traps into jokes. I wanted to say let them talk, let the myth collapse without you inside it. But family is a knot tied before you know how to use your hands. "Then we go," I said, because sometimes love is logistics. We drive our own car, park where leaving was easy, set a time limit, keep our shoes dry. She nodded like a soldier counting exits. On the way home, she bought a card with nothing printed inside. She wrote, "Happy birthday," and signed her name like a witness, not a participant. That night she packed an overnight bag and left it by the door, a small suitcase and a larger intention. Distance, she knew, was an escape, but it made escape possible. We hit the cul-de-sac at 2 on the dot because Ava said arrivals are safer when you're part of the herd. The house glittered like it had been waxed. Fresh paint, hedges with military posture, a banner in tasteful gold script that pretended it wasn't shouting. The deck was the first thing you noticed, all honeyed boards and a sheen that looked like money. It wrapped the pool in a perfect rectangle, an invitation and a warning. Janelle's friends clustered in curated knots. The gym crowd in fitted polos, The real estate smiles with sunglasses folded into their hair, a pair of women in identical sandals pretending they hadn't planned it. Her father stood at the grill in an apron that made him look approachable until you saw his eyes scanning for errors. He turned neat like it was an inspection. Her mother floated, not walking so much as adjusting the air, making micro-corrections. A coaster under a sweating glass, a hand on his shoulder guiding a laugh to the right volume. She moved people the way you move furniture, for balance, not comfort. Ava slipped beside me, smaller somehow, even at full height. Before we got out of the car, she recited her rules, a litany learned the hard way. Keep water in your hand so no one presses a drink on you. Keep your shoes on no matter what. Don't sit in the middle of a group where you can't stand without a scene. Limit the compliments to one per parent so they don't sniff or more. Identify the nearest quiet door. Leave while the sun is still up. She spoke like an EMT triaging herself. We crossed the lawn. Janelle saw us and performed surprise, a little squeal that bought her applause. She hugged Ava a fraction too long, turning them so the good side faced the crowd. You made it, she said, and the subtext was inked in glitter. You finally did something right. Her father handed me a plate as if recruiting me into the illusion. Great day for it, he said, eyes already sliding past to a platter that needed arranging. Her mother kissed the air near Ava's cheek and whispered, Thank you for dressing appropriately, as if the day were a test with one question. I watched Ava scan the deck the way climbers scan a face for holds, mapping risk. She took a step and then another, the boards faintly slick underfoot, nothing anyone else would notice with a beer in hand. Her smile was the kind you wear for photographs that live on mantles. She positioned herself near the edge of a group, one shoulder angled toward the sliding door. Her laugh came on time, never loud, a percussion soft enough not to wake anything. It was impressive, the machine of it all. The grill hissed. The playlist never faltered. Compliments made their rounds and returned like doves to the same hands. If you stayed at the surface, you could believe this was how safety felt, predictable, polished, everyone in their assigned place. Beside me, Ava sipped her water and kept her shoes dry, counting exits the way other people count blessings. Janelle held court near the shallow end, a queen with a plastic cup scepter, collecting fealty and compliments. When she saw us drift close, she threw out the net of nostalgia. Remember when Ava and I used to put on plays? She said to the semicircle, eyes on me, not her sister. I carried every scene. Ava just cried on cue. Laughter arrived on schedule. Ava smiled like a person bracing for a flash. I said something neutral about childhood being a long rehearsal for nothing. Janelle lit up like I'd handed her a prop. Exactly, she said. Some of us are naturals. She bumped Ava's shoulder, friendly on the surface, a nudge that said keep up. It was always a relay with her. Hand off a memory, run the victory lap before anyone checked the time. A man in a golf shirt, Tyler, apparently, sidled in with that smirk that comes free with certain tax brackets. We were just saying, he announced. Tonight's the night Ava loosens up. He pitched it to the group like a fundraising goal. A couple of nods, the kind of grin you get when a joke already has victims. Someone said, 50 says she won't even get her hair wet. Janelle didn't laugh right away. She pretended to weigh fairness. Make it interesting, she said finally, and the circle tightened the way circles do when they're about to forget their people. I felt the board flex under my heel, and almost glossed someone had brushed across the deck like a last-minute decision. There was a tacky slick give to it, something that made the surface feel both polished and uncertain. A kid ran past and skidded a little. His mother called, Careful, then caught sight of Janelle and changed it to, Happy birthday. Ava shifted her weight, and I saw that tiny correction in her ankle, the body's calculus done without permission. Janelle leaned close enough that perfume beat out the smell of chlorine. You have to admit, she told Ava, you can be a buzzkill. Just for tonight, try not to manage everything. The word manage flipped like a fish in her mouth. Ava took a breath, the kind where she straightens her shoulders but not her spine. I'm fine, she said, which in our language meant I'm walking a narrow line, and I need you to see it. Tyler lifted his cup. To good times, no drama. I heard the bed blossom around me. Numbers, conditions, like ivy on a fence. Janelle didn't set it up. She just declined to dismantle it. She had that politician's talent for letting other people carry her intentions. The sun slid a degree lower, and the deck shone like a tongue. Somewhere behind us the grill hissed, and her father said, "Perfect." To the meat, to the day, to the story he wanted. Janelle's palm touched the small of Ava's back, guiding, a choreography of care that wasn't. "Come on," she sang. "Let's get you out of teacher mode." Ava held her water glass like a talisman and angled toward the sliding door, counting exits. I nudged her hand, a gentle clink. "Stay near the edge," I meant. Shoes on, eyes open. The wood under us was too proud of itself. The jokes were looking for a body. It happened in the space between one breath and the next. Ava shifted to skirt a cluster of chairs, the board under her foot giving a sly little shrug, and then the world tipped. Her glass pitched a bright arc, water scattering like thrown beads. Her other foot searched for friction that wasn't there. I reached, too far too late. The laugh that should have followed a harmless stumble never arrived. Instead, there was the blunt punctuation of her back striking the concrete lip of the pool, the sound swallowed by the water's slap. Everything went thin and far away, like hearing through a wall. Ava's mouth opened, but what came out was only air. Her hand scrabbled, not flailing, exactly, just trying to push against nothing. I saw her eyes register the inventory, arms yes, chest yes, then the drop-off, nothing below. A silence rose that wasn't quiet. It had a pitch to it, a pressure. People held their drinks like props in a play that had lost its lines. For a half-second Janelle laughed, the reflexive, bright note of someone who's always found gravity optional. It hooked in the air, seeking permission, then softened into a smile that said, "Are we joking?" Her father turned from the grill with his practiced sigh as if a burger had charred. Her mother swept toward us, not running, never running, fingers already smoothing the scene. I was on my knees, my palms under Ava's shoulders the way you steady a picture that's sliding off the nail. "Don't move," I said, stupid with urgency. She blinked, focused on me like I was across a parking lot. "I can't feel my legs," she whispered, and the words were so precise, so quietly placed, that I understood they were the truest ones she had ever said. People hovered, waiting for the family to tell them what to do. Tyler let out a chuckle that sounded like a cough. "She's fine," he offered to the weather. Janelle crouched, careful not to wrinkle. "Ava, it's okay," she said, voice pitched for cameras. "Just breathe." She glanced up, taking her cues from home base. Her father, apron immaculate, shook his head once. "Walk it off," he said, and the deck seemed to tilt again, this time under everyone. Ava tried to move her heel. I watched her will travel the length of her body and vanish at her waist like a train into fog. "Please don't," I told her, my own voice oddly distant. The board smelled like chemical honey. Chlorine licked the air. The sun pressed a bright thumb to the scene, insisting this was a day for ease. "I can't feel anything," she said again, not louder, just more real, and something in me aligned with that sentence, a level finding true. Janelle's smile thinned. Someone set down a cup. The party's soundtrack kept playing because playlists don't know about spinal cords. I looked up and saw the guests reading the family for the answer they wanted. Is this a joke? Is this a performance? Is this one of those moments we're supposed to ignore until it behaves? Ava's fingers found mine and squeezed, hard, present, alive, and below the grip there was the cliff. I shouted for an ambulance. The word sounded indecent out here, like a curse. For a heartbeat longer, no one moved. Then the spell cracked, not by kindness, but by the simple fact of what had already happened. Ava tried to lift her head and her breath hitched, like a car in too high a gear. "Please," she said, the smallest word made heavy. "I can't feel my legs." I told her not to move. My hands hovered uselessly because every instinct wanted to help, and every bit of sense said stillness was the only help worth anything. Her father arrived, jaw set like he'd been interrupted during something important. He didn't look at Ava so much as at the shape of her on his deck. "Get up," he said, the same tone he used for dandelions. "You're fine." "I'm not," Ava whispered. "I need." "Walk it off," he snapped, as if the command could pull sensation back through bone. Her mother's voice came oiled and bright. "Sweetheart, people are watching." She knelt, but it was the kind of kneel that keeps clothes clean. "Let's not make a scene on your sister's day." Ava's hand shook. She tried to move a foot that might as well have belonged to someone else. I caught her wrist. "Don't," I said. "Please don't." Tyler hovered with the stale grin of a man who hates returning things. "She slipped," he offered. "Happens." A woman's voice cut through, calm, caring, meant for rooms where panic breathes. "Nobody touch her." She parted the semicircle with the authority people only argue with once. Mid-30s, hair pulled back, eyes doing triage before her hands did. "I'm Rachel," she said to Ava, already at her side. "I'm an ER nurse. I need you to stay very, very still." Ava nodded, grateful and scared. Rachel slid 2 fingers to her wrist, checked a watch, then looked at me. "Hold her hand, not her shoulders." To the crowd, "Does anyone know exactly how she fell?" "Deck's fine," her father said, defensive as if someone had insulted his grill. "Installed by professionals." Rachel's palm grazed the boards and came up with a shine. She rubbed finger to thumb once, frowning. "This is slicker than it should be," she said, mostly to herself. Then, louder, to no one in particular, "We're calling an ambulance." Her mother recoiled like the word had teeth. "That's not necessary. We can help her inside." "No." Rachel didn't raise her voice. She placed it. "Possible spinal injury. We don't move her. We immobilize and wait for EMS." Her father took a step forward, heat in his face. "This is my house. This is her spine," Rachel said, eyes steady. She was already on the phone, giving an address with a clarity that made the party look like smudged glass. "Female, late 20s, fall with impact to lumbar region, loss of sensation below the waist. Breathing stable, pulse rapid. We need a board and collar." Ava's fingers tightened around mine. "Thank you," she breathed. To Rachel or the universe, I couldn't tell. Janelle appeared at the edge of the group, cheeks stiff with a smile that didn't know where to land. "Maybe we could just stop." Rachel didn't look over. "Everyone stay back. Keep her shaded." She flicked a glance at me. "Can you get a towel for her head? And stand where you block the sun." I did what she asked. Around us, guests adjusted their faces like mirrors searching for the right angle. Her mother hissed, "Rachel, please," the way you try to rein in a waiter who refuses to sing. Rachel ignored her, listening to the dispatcher, one palm resting near Ava's shoulder without touching. The playlist had finally run out. The silence that followed felt less like absence and more like admission. Somewhere in the distance, a siren found its key and held it. The first paramedic was already talking before I saw her face. "Hi, I'm Sarah. No one moves except us." Her partner slid a hard case open with a click that cut the yard in half. Rachel briefed them in tight, efficient sentences. Loss of sensation. Impact to lumbar. No alcohol. Possible contaminant on the deck. Sarah nodded and the team became choreography. Collar first, hands at temples, the count whispered like prayer. "On 3 we log roll to check the spine," Sarah said, eyes on me. "You, stay where she can see you." I knelt where Ava's vision landed and said her name the way you say home to a dog in a thunderstorm. She whispered back, "I'm here," which was not a fact but an effort. They slid the backboard under her with the kind of care that feels like apology. Even that small shift made her cry out, a sound she tried to swallow and couldn't. The straps bit down one by one, forehead, chest, hips, shins, turning her into the shape of an answer. Sarah checked her pupils. "Squeeze his hand," she said. Ava did, strong, and then the strength fell away into the cliff. Rachel crouched by the deck again, rubbed finger and thumb, brought them to her nose. "Not water," she said. The male paramedic, Mike, per his badge, took out a small camera, the kind that lives exactly for this. Shudder, shudder, shudder. The scene where Ava slipped, the gleam on the boards, the scuffed crescent of her fall tracked in the shine. He labeled a vial and scraped a sample like he was harvesting a lie. Janelle hovered at the border, mascara perfect, voice chipping down to girl. "It was just a joke," she said, not to anyone, almost to the air. Tyler, who had suddenly misplaced all his opinions, stared at his shoes. Sarah's head turned a degree. "What joke?" she asked, neutral as a scale. Janelle's mouth opened and shut, the sound stuck on some invisible hook. "Just, we were going to get her to loosen up." The word loosen landed with an ugly weight beside the straps that kept Ava from moving at all. Her father finally tried to plant himself in front of authority, apron still on like a flag. "This is unnecessary," he said. "She'll be fine." Sarah didn't look at him. "Sir, you can help by clearing a path." He did, because some tones even pride recognizes. They lifted in unison, the stretcher accepting Ava's weight with a soft hydraulic sigh. The deck glared. The crowd stepped backward in the awkward ballet of not wanting to be in the way and not wanting to be involved. Rachel walked alongside, one hand near Ava's shoulder without touching, a guardrail made of presence. Out front, the siren cut itself, and the ambulance sat there panting. As they wheeled her toward it, a patrol car glided up, lights spinning politely. The officer took in the scene in a sweep, the camera, the vial, the deck, the mother with her hands steepled like prayer and theater at once, Janelle empty of jokes. Sarah called out vitals as they loaded. BP low, heart rate elevated, sensation absent below T. The doors swallowed the words. Ava caught my eye as the stretcher slid in. "Come," she asked, barely voice at all. "I'm with you," I said. I meant past the driveway, past the story the family wanted, past whatever name the MRI would give this. The officer stepped aside to let me climb in. Behind us, the shutter clicked one more time, and the day finally admitted what it was. The ER swallowed us in light and linoleum. They rolled Ava into a bay that pretended to be private with a curtain and a number clipped to plastic. A tech clipped a pulse ox to her finger. The monitor found a rhythm and announced it in green. The caller stayed. The board stayed. Stillness was the first medicine and the hardest. Questions came like rain. Any head strike? Loss of consciousness? Meds? Allergies? Ava answered what she could and let me fill in addresses, birthdays, the emergency contact that made me official. Someone pressed a marker line along her spine, vertebra by vertebra, like counting beats. Hands tested sensation with a blunt tip and a pin. "Tell me where you feel this," she tried. There was a border they kept arriving at and could not cross. They slid her for x-rays, a metal sigh under bone. CT next, white tunnel, low ship engine hum. The screens bloomed with cross-sections of the person I knew better than any map. A nurse told me where to sit, and I sat and didn't. Time thickened. Every minute felt like proof that I had not been fast enough to invent friction under her feet. Dr. Imani found us, with the calm of someone trained to carry bad facts without dropping them. She introduced herself, neurosurgery, and asked Ava to tell the story again, not for drama, but for detail. Then she pulled up images that made opinion irrelevant. On the screen, Ava's spine floated in grayscale, bright edges where bone was, darker where bone wasn't what it should be. Dr. Imani traced an area low in the thoracic spine down into lumbar, with the blunt end of a pin. "Here," she said. "There's a fracture at T12 with retropulsion, bone fragments pushing back toward the cord. There's also edema, swelling, compressing the spinal cord." Ava's face went very still, the way faces do when the body is being renamed. "Will I?" She didn't finish. "We think this is an incomplete spinal cord injury," Dr. Imani said, each word set carefully on the table between us. "Incomplete means the cord is damaged, not transected. That matters for prognosis. We can't promise function will return, but incompleteness improves the odds of recovery, especially with urgent decompression." Surgery moved from possibility to plan in a handful of sentences. Posterior approach, laminectomy to relieve pressure, instrumentation to stabilize, screws and rods anchoring the break so healing has a chance. Consent forms arrived. Ava's hand shook and then steadied. "Do it," she said. "Please." They prepped her. I held the corner of her sheet and said all the small things that mean don't leave. She was wheeled away into a door that didn't let me follow. I walked circles until the linoleum learned my steps. Night changed the color of the waiting room 2 or 3 times before Dr. Imani came back. Cap off, mask tugged down, eyes clear in that tired way that means a job done well. "She did fine," she said. "We decompressed the cord and stabilized from T11 to L1. The cord looked contused but intact. Now we wait and work." In recovery, Ava surfaced between beeps and blankets. She tried to move, and the machine told on her heart. "Hey," I said, and her eyes found me. They fixed what they could, I told her, and it felt like reading a weather report to a person in a storm cellar. Later, Dr. Imani held up the post-op images, hardware shining like quiet punctuation along the shadowed column. Opinions had left the building. The deck, the laughter, the command to walk it off, none of that mattered in the face of this vocabulary. T12. Incomplete injury. Decompression. Stabilization. Ava listened, breathing through pain and language, the worst fear translated into terms that could be worked with, if not undone. They came in with the afternoon, two women in plain clothes whose voices knew how to make rooms smaller without turning cruel. They introduced themselves, showed badges, asked if Ava felt up to talking. She nodded. The caller was gone. The lines and monitors remained like punctuation you can't ignore. I moved to the chair by the curtain and became a useful shadow. They started at the beginning and worked forward, stopping her gently when she apologized for not remembering the exact second the world tilted. "Tell us what you do know," one said, pen parked, attention unblinking. Ava described the deck's shine, the sideways slide, the concrete finding her spine, the blankness below the waist like a trapdoor. She said the words her father had said to her. She didn't look at me when she repeated them. Walk it off. Don't make a scene. The phrases sounded small in a hospital, like souvenirs from a place you don't plan to visit again. They asked about alcohol, and she shook her head. About pills, illness, sleep. No, yes, never enough. When she spoke about Rachel, the nurse, something in the detective's shoulders eased. Names that belong to helpers tend to do that. They asked me for my piece. I told them about the almost laugh, the way the room checked the family's faces for cues before deciding what was true. An hour later they came back with other people's versions. Witnesses had talked. The camera the paramedics used had done its work, and so had the lab. The residue scraped from the boards was a deck oil sealant, brand identified, Kim located in the garage with a smear missing in a way that didn't look like a manufacturer's suggestion. Someone had heard Janelle say, "Just a joke." Someone else had seen Tyler pass her the rag. Janelle herself, cornered by facts that didn't care about birthdays, had said the word, prank, and then tried to bury it under, never meant. The detectives didn't gloat. They laid the bricks in a line. Reckless endangerment. Serious bodily injury. They said Janelle was being detained pending charges. The phrase landed with a dull, right sound, like a door closing that should have closed years ago. They also asked about time. How long between fall and call? 10 minutes? 15? Longer? Ava's mouth tightened. She told them about pleading. About the way help becomes impolite in certain houses. The detectives' faces didn't change, but a pen pressed harder into paper. Later, a nurse told us a patrol car had rolled up to the cul-de-sac quiet, lights low. Neighbors would learn a new route for their evening walks. Someone would say the word investigation at a volume appropriate for porches. In the waiting room, I saw Ava's parents pass like weather fronts. Her mother with her hands folded in pious geometry, her father's jaw set to hold an entire worldview in place. They didn't come in. The detectives would be with them, asking about minutes that had stretched like years. Back in the bay, Ava stared at the ceiling tile with a hairline crack and breathed the way they'd taught her. What happened had been translated into categories and codes. Oil wasn't a sheen anymore, it was evidence. Denial had a timestamp. The silence that used to swallow her was finally being asked questions it could not answer. The woman from the DA's office arrived with a folder and the posture of someone who has spent years naming things other people try not to see. She introduced herself, Laura, and asked if Ava was comfortable. Comfortable was a foreign country. Ava nodded anyway. The room clicked and hissed around us. Laura sat, opened the folder, and laid out the map. "We're filing reckless endangerment resulting in serious bodily injury against your sister," she said, steady as a metronome. "For your parents, criminal negligence, specifically failure to seek necessary medical care in a timely manner." The phrases sounded clinical and right, like labels on jars in a lab. I watched Ava's face take them in, the way you watch a new language move from sound to meaning. Janelle, not prankster but defendant. Parents, not guardians but subjects of a timeline. Laura didn't promise outcomes. She promised process, discovery, hearings, The way facts walk themselves to a courtroom and stand there without shame. You won't be alone, she added, and the door opened as if on cue. A woman stepped in with a notebook and the soft authority of someone who knows which forms unlock which doors. I'm Dana, she said. Victim advocate. I'll be your person for everything that isn't a surgeon or a judge. Dana translated bureaucracy into human. How to get mileage for hospital visits, who to call when a bill arrives addressed to your old body, what to expect when you give a statement and the room goes cold. She asked about work and stares, and whether night brought pain or dreams or both. She listened like listening was a task with metrics. Laura talked about rights, impact statements, restitution that might cover some, not all. Then she shifted to another column entirely. Separate from the criminal case, you have civil options, she said, and the air got thicker. A personal injury suit against your sister is obvious. Against your parents as homeowners, premises liability, and negligent failure to render aid. Their insurance will have limits. Beyond that, assets can be pursued. I know how that sounds. She didn't flinch. Ava stared at her hands, the four-tape wrinkling when she flexed. I don't want to ruin them, she said, the old script trying one last time to be cast. Dana leaned in. You aren't ruining anyone, she said. You're making sure your future is funded by the people who made it more expensive. That's different. Laura outlined timelines like train routes. 2 years for filing. Sooner is better. Experts for life care plans, economists for lost wages. Words I'd only seen on the backs of buses now apply to the woman I loved. She mentioned a lawyer who specialized in spinal cord injuries, a man who could turn invoices and needs into a settlement with numbers that weren't guesses. When they left, the room felt both emptier and more furnished. Names had been given to Harm. Harm had answered to them. Ava lay back, eyes on the ceiling crack that had become her lighthouse. Reckless endangerment, she said, as if tasting it. Then, quieter, criminal negligence. The words weren't revenge, they were measurement. She slid her hand into mine. We're going to need help, she said. We have it, I told her. It wasn't comfort. It was inventory. Charges. Rights. Advocates. Options. A future with a price tag and a plan. Outside the window, a siren went by without stopping. Inside, for once, the story used the right names. Rehab began with a whiteboard schedule and a body that had to be introduced to itself again. Mornings were transfer training, bed to chair, chair to mat, mat back to bed, each move a sentence diagrammed and spoken slowly. The therapists, David with the patient cheer of a trail guide, Mel with a coach's clap, taught leverage like a new alphabet. Hips first, then hands, then a pivot that felt like catching a bus when you're sure it already pulled away. Pain announced itself in bright flares, and then settled into a throb you could almost set your watch by. Ava learned to breathe through it, counting the inhales like rungs on a ladder she couldn't yet climb. The braces came later, carbon and Velcro and stubborn hope. They lay on the table like promises that required signatures every hour. David buckled them with the tenderness of someone fitting armor on a knight who has doubts. We borrow what we can from physics, he said, tightening straps. Between parallel bars, Ava stood, or rather we stood, and the bars told the truth about how much standing is a team sport. Her knees trembled, hips seeking an old choreography. 2 steps. Pause. Sweat at her temples in a room that wasn't hot. 3 steps. A small sound escaped her, not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Progress has that accent. Afternoons were a different kind of work. Occupational therapy taught the domestic magic tricks. How to button with one hand when the other is holding you up. How to cook from a seated position without searing your knees. How to navigate a bathroom designed by an optimist. A mirror opposite the sink made her meet her own eyes while she practiced, and sometimes she could, and sometimes she couldn't. The fan in our apartment turned to white noise in her memory, a promise waiting for her on the other side of discharge. Group sessions opened a door I didn't know she needed until she wheeled through it. A circle of people who had fallen from ladders, from motorcycles, from luck. Tara, 2 years post-injury, moved on forearm crutches with the authority of someone who remembers the floor and forgives it by inches. Malik joked about his chair like you joke about a car that's gotten you through winters. Then he talked about nights when pain comes in like a bouncer and checks your name twice. No one performed resilience. They handed it around like a tool. Here, try this grip. It saved me on a Tuesday. I watched Ava listen with the intensity she usually reserved for students who hid essays in their silence. She began to say, we, instead of they, when she talked about spasms and pressure sores and the way strangers either stared or pretended not to. Her sentences shifted, less about returning to normal, more about building a new one that didn't apologize for existing. On the bars, her steps found a rhythm that wasn't grace, but was undeniably hers. On the mat, she laughed at a failed transfer, then nailed the next one, and the laugh turned into something lighter. At night, I wheeled her to the rehab garden, where the ramps switched back through hedges. We watched the sky trade colors. I thought strength would feel like steel, she said, flexing her fingers. It feels like rope. I didn't correct her. Rope holds knots, takes weight, burns a little in the hands. She was relearning the body, yes, but also the story that body told. Every strap, every breath, every inch wrestled from gravity was a sentence in a language that finally included her. Help arrived in casseroles and envelopes with no return address. The fourth grade team turned their planning period into a production line. Lasagnas with oven instructions in Sharpie, gift cards tucked under foil. Someone set up a page online with a photo of Ava that didn't look like a please so much as a promise. Money trickled, then pooled. I watched names we hadn't said out loud in years resurface with $50 attached, as if the past were clearing its throat and offering a chair. At school, the principal found sub-days without making us ask twice. Parents from Ava's class sent notes in shaky kid cursive that said things like, "Miss, be brave," sprinkling bravery like glitter you can't vacuum out. Our mailbox learned to expect kindness at 3 in the afternoon. Her parents said nothing. Through a cousin who likes to narrate, we heard they'd been told to keep quiet. Counsel's advice, as if silence were a bandage you leave on until the wound forgets it's there. The absence had a weight to it. Ava carried it like a book she never wanted to read again, but couldn't throw away because her name was on the spine. We met the civil attorney in an office with carpet designed to hide coffee stains. Greenberg, kind eyes, no theater. He didn't sell vengeance. He stacked facts. Life care plan. Equipment not covered. Home modifications. A caregiver's hours. Lost wages not just now, but 10 years from now, when the body is tired of being brave. He drew numbers in tidy columns, and the page got heavy. It felt indecent to attach math to what had happened. It also felt like air entering a sealed room. On the drive home, Ava kept her hands flat on her thighs, reading the braille of her own tension. It feels like I'm choosing to hurt them again, she said. Even after everything. You're choosing ramps and rails, and a shower you don't have to be afraid of, I said, and heard how practical can sound like betrayal when grief still wants poetry. You're choosing to make sure future you isn't punished for past them. She stared out the window at a row of porches with hanging plants that did not know about lawsuits. I was raised to take the smaller slice, she said. To prove I'm not greedy. She swallowed. Greedy is wrong. Needy is worse. Needy is a body telling the truth, I said, and it wasn't a line I prepared. It landed anyway. Back at the apartment, the new shower chair waited like a humble throne. Friends had assembled it with the earnest intensity of people who can't fix the big thing, so they tightened every screw on the small one. Ava ran her palm along the armrest, the kind of touch you give to something that will hold you. We signed the retainer the next morning. Greenberg's pen made a quiet, ordinary sound, the same click you'd hear if you were authorizing copier paper. Ava's face didn't show triumph. It showed permission, self-issued. We drew new lines on paper, and the world answered with process servers and dates. The lines at home were softer. A calendar taped to the fridge with therapy blocks color-coded. A jar by the door labeled rides, where people dropped in spare time. The moral math didn't get cleaner. It just got honest. Survival costs. We decided to pay it out loud. Depositions felt like slow surgery without anesthesia, precision instruments, fluorescent light, and no guarantee the pain would lead anywhere good. We sat in a conference room where the air conditioning had opinions. A court reporter arranged her machine like a small altarpiece. Greenberg prepped us with rules that sounded simple until you had to use them. Answer only what's asked, don't fill silence. The truth can stand on one leg. Janelle went first. She arrived styled for an apology tour. Soft sweater, softer voice. Under oath, words lost their wiggle room. It was a joke. Became. I applied oil to the deck planks to create a slippery surface, and the room recorded it without blinking. When Greenberg asked why, she reached for the usual scaffolding. To lighten the mood, my sister can be intense, and found it wouldn't hold. Did you intend for her to fall? I intended for her to slip. Into the pool? Yes. A pin clattered somewhere in the machinery of her certainty. Her father took the chair and stiffened it. He recited contractor names, like Holy Writ, then stumbled on time. How many minutes between the fall and the 911 call? He repeated, counting pride as if it were a watch. A few. Greenberg let few sit there until it curdled. 15? 20. Silence filled in the numbers. We didn't think it was serious, he said finally, the closest he'd come to confession in any language. Her mother's testimony was the quietest blade. I didn't want to embarrass her. Greenberg didn't raise an eyebrow. By calling for medical help. She picked at an invisible thread on her sleeve. By making a scene. The transcript swallowed that, too. Insurance emerged like a hallway that ends earlier than you expect. The homeowner's policy had a ceiling that looked tall until you did the math on chairs and caregivers, and a spine's long attention span. Liability limits. MedPay caps. Exclusions with cheerful names. Greenberg brought in a life care planner who itemized our future. Cushions that prevent wounds you don't feel, vans that kneel, hours of human hands. The number at the bottom felt both obscene and insufficient. Settlement talks were a winter sport. Everything slow, everyone braced. Their attorney spoke in phrases that sounded empathetic if you didn't listen to the verbs. They recognized the hardship, he said, while pushing pennies around an imaginary table. Offers crept forward like snails, each with a string. Greenberg countered with exhibits and a patience I envied. Progress wasn't cinematic. It was incremental and boring and necessary. In therapy, Ava moved from the fall to everything that made the fall make sense. Claire drew a genogram on a legal pad and mapped it like a crime scene, roles etched in ink, golden child, scapegoat, enabler, gatekeeper. They practiced new words for old gaslight. Overreacting became accurately reacting to a minimizer. Ungrateful became setting a boundary that caused someone else their comfort. Ava rehearsed saying no without the footnote. On nights after depositions, she'd sit with tea and reread the transcripts like weather reports. Do I sound angry? She'd ask. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she sounded like a person learning to believe herself in public. The difference mattered more than any clause we haggled over. When the insurer finally admitted the policy's top floor, and we asked for the staircase beyond it, her parents' faces shifted into arithmetic. Assets. Accounts. A house that had once been a stage now measured in appraisals. None of it felt like winning. It felt like renaming, harm into liability, denial into timestamp choices. In the margins, Ava wrote definitions in her own hand. Trust, not the absence of doubt but the decision to stay with yourself when other people leave. Court didn't look like TV. It looked like a Tuesday in a building that forgot it was supposed to matter. Fluorescent hum. Carpeting designed to survive decades of shoes. We sat on benches polished by other people's waiting, while our case clicked through its stages like a slow turnstile. Janelle took the plea in a voice so quiet the microphone leaned in. Reckless endangerment resulting in serious bodily injury. The judge read the terms as if calling whether 2 years in state prison, 3 on probation, conditions about counseling and alcohol, restitution as the law imagines it. Janelle nodded like a metronome. She glanced once toward the gallery, not at Ava so much as toward a past where glances always bought her time. It didn't buy anything here. The deputy touched her elbow, and the door swallowed her. I felt no triumph. Just a weight shifting from denial to gravity. Her parents stood together, but not touching. Their lawyer did the talking, age, spotless records. Deep regret, the phrase tragic accident, trying to squeeze past facts. The judge said the words that would live on paper. Probation for 2 years, for 100 hours of community service, mandatory education on emergency response, a fine that meant something to them and nothing to a hospital. No jail. The gavel didn't come down. It just existed, a prop that implied consequence. Ava sat straight, hands folded over the brace ridge under her shirt. When it was done, she exhaled like someone who'd been holding her breath for a year. The civil case closed in an office with lemon water and a too-soft couch. The insurer climbed to its policy limit and stopped there, polite and immovable. After that, arithmetic replaced sentiment. The house sold. Retirement accounts thinned. A trust took shape in documents thick enough to use as doorstops. Funds earmarked for home health hours, replacement chairs, a van with hand controls, a cushion that costs what a cheap car used to. Our apartment became a construction site, and then a home again. Wider doors, a shower with a bench and room to turn, counters lowered to meet her where she is now. Railings appeared on walls, like sentences underlined for emphasis. When the checks cleared and the contractors left, the silence was strange. Justice had been measured out in years and hours, dollars and square footage. It added up and didn't. I wheeled Ava onto the new ramp the first evening it was ours. The chair rolled easy over the threshold they used to catch her front casters. We sat by the window and watched clouds bruise into sunset. "Do you feel better?" I asked, hating the bluntness and asking anyway. "I feel possible," she said after a while. "And tired." She rubbed the edge of the armrest with her thumb like she was memorizing it. "They're going to tell a different story about this," she added, not bitter, just correct. "We have our version," I said. It sounded thin until I looked at the evidence. A doorway that welcomed her, a bathroom that didn't require courage, a calendar that wasn't just appointments but also dinners with friends who stayed. Heavy and insufficient can live in the same room. Some nights the sentences the judge read clang around our walls. Other nights we eat takeout on the lower counter and laugh at a joke so dumb it's perfect, and the chair squeaks when she shifts, and I'm grateful for hardware with a sense of humor. Justice didn't fix anything. It made room. In that room, Ava reaches for a glass and doesn't ask anyone to hand it to her. That's not victory. It's something I can believe in. Going home felt like moving into a version of our life with the knobs turned to new settings. The apartment had learned our names. Doorways widened their shoulders. Light switches dropped to where her hand rests without reaching. The bathroom became a room that didn't require negotiation. Roll in, turn, bench waiting, water that obeyed with a lever instead of a stubborn twist. The first night, she wheeled in circles just because she could, laughing at the geometry that finally made sense. The car arrived with hand controls that looked simple and felt like a thesis. A metal lever to the right of the wheel, push to brake, pull to accelerate. The installer taught her in a parking lot that smelled like hot asphalt, cones set up in a hesitant slalom. Ava's hands found the rhythm, brain rerouting highways in real time. She parked with a precision that made the instructor whistle and me unclench. On the way home, we took the long route for no reason except that we could. Every red light felt less like a stop and more like proof. Mornings adjusted. A part-time caregiver, Mara, practical, kind, arrived at 8 with a canvas tote of quiet competence. Transfers when pain argued, stretching when muscles tried to forget, reminders to drink water, and not be noble about fatigue. Mara learned the quirks of our kitchen by day 3, and the quirks of our moods by day 5. She never made independence a competition. Some hours were for help, some weren't. Both were allowed. Work shifted from the front of a classroom to a desk with a second monitor and a stack of sticky notes that grew like ivy. The district carved out a role that fit what she could do and what she was suddenly fiercely good at: curriculum design with a spine of trauma-informed practice. Ava translated survival into pedagogy, lesson plans that accounted for kids who flinch at bells, seating charts that made exits visible, scripts for teachers to borrow when a student's silence isn't defiance but fear. She built units on community and repair that didn't read like slogans. When she presented over video to a room full of tired educators, they sat up. I watched the chat fill with relief disguised as questions. Afternoons had shape, therapy, then an hour for emails, then the garden behind our building where ramps stitched the path together. Some days, she walked the parallel bars at the outpatient center with braces hugging her shins, each step an argument with gravity she sometimes won. Other days the chair did the work, and no one called at losing. At home, ordinary things resumed and became newsworthy. She made coffee without burning her knees. I learned the exact angle that made the refrigerator shelf friendly. We failed at a new recipe and ordered pizza without guilt. The fan hummed at night, not as cover anymore, more like a metronome for a life that kept time. "Different isn't worse," she said once, watching the hand controls flash in the dashboard lights. "It's just honest." I nodded, uselessly proud of levers and doors, and the quiet courage of letting someone help you put on your shoes. Forward didn't look like a road. It looked like a room we could both reach. The letter showed up on a Wednesday, heavy paper like something expensive was supposed to happen inside. Janelle's handwriting had always been neat in a way that felt performative, but this was smaller, humbler, like she was trying to take up less room even on a page. Ava didn't open it right away. She put it on the counter beside the jar of wooden spoons, and we made dinner around it like it was a guest deciding if it wanted to stay. After dishes, she slit the envelope and read standing up. Her face didn't crack or melt. It concentrated, like someone sounding out a language they almost forgot. "No excuses," it said. "No birthday, no alcohol, no." We all laughed. "I did it. I chose it. I heard you. I am sorry." It was the first time Janelle's words didn't reach for a softer landing than the truth would allow. Ava read it twice, and then a third time slower. She set the pages down and rubbed the base of her throat where hard things tend to sit. "It's real," she said, incredulous and tired. I didn't tell her what to do with real. I made tea and let the kettle's small thunder fill the silence. People want reconciliation to be a door with a handle that clicks. Ava chose a line on the floor instead. She wrote a note back, not a bridge, not a wall, more like a boundary painted bright so no one could say they hadn't seen it. "Thank you for the apology. I'm working on my life. If we ever meet, it will be because it helps me, not because you need it." She read it out loud once, listening for apologies she didn't owe, then sealed it and asked me to mail it. The mailbox closed on the envelope with a sound that felt like permission. Her family didn't disappear. They just moved to the horizon where weather forms. The center of the room filled with other people. Rachel texted on the anniversary of the fall, a simple heart and a line, "Proud of you." Dr. Imani sent an article about a new brace and wrote, "Curious what David thinks." David, for his part, taught Ava a trick with a gate belt that made transfers feel like sleight of hand. Claire kept a chair open on Tuesdays, a constant in a calendar that liked to pretend it was in charge. The peer circle widened too. Tara showed up with a bouquet that wasn't flowers, colored resistance bands tied in a bow. Malik brought a joke and a phone number for a mechanic who doesn't flinch at adaptive vans. We had them over and watched the dog from 2B ignore every human attempt at dignity. Laughter took its rightful place at our table, not as a cover, not as a weapon, but as proof. As for us, we kept choosing each other in ways that were almost invisible from the sidewalk. I learned the art of not rushing her on bad pain mornings. She learned the art of asking me to slow down when my fixing instinct ran ahead of her will. Some nights we talked about the letter again, not to decide anything, just to practice not deciding. Boundaries, it turns out, are less about distance and more about shape. The shape of our days held, work that mattered, a body that told the truth, a home that didn't require permission to enter. Before bed, she slid the letter into a folder with discharge papers, court documents, the life care plan, a shelf where the past lives when it's not driving. "What we keep," she said, closing the drawer. "What we release." She turned off the light and reached for my hand in the dark, finding it like a habit and a choice. 2 years is enough time for the world to act like nothing happened and for us to build a life that remembers every step. The chair squeaks in the same spot on the ramp. The hand controls click into gear like a second heartbeat. Ava walks short distances with braces that shine like honest work. On good days the steps line up and her breath stays even. On bad days the pain barges in uninvited and we plan around it the way sailors plan around weather, except the sky, tie down what shifts. She mentors now at the rehab hospital on Wednesday afternoons, the hour when new patients stare at ceilings and ask questions without asking them. She wheels in with a tote bag full of practical magic, lip balm, a phone charger, the kind of humor that doesn't hurry grief. She doesn't tell anyone it will be fine. She says it will be possible, which is truer and somehow kinder. I sit in the lobby and watch families learn how to look at someone they love without searching for the old map. Advocacy found her the way water finds low ground. She consults on district training about trauma-informed classrooms, turns staff meetings into rooms where kids, like she once was, get a chance at being believed. When she talks about exits and sensory overload and the way dismissal wounds deeper than sticks and stones, teachers stop pretending they didn't know. The emails that follow read like relief. At home, we still practice the ordinary as if it's a craft. Coffee, pills, shoes, stretches. I've learned the choreography of a gate belt. She's learned which jokes pry a bad morning open just enough to let light in. We keep a calendar that refuses to choose between therapy appointments and dinners with friends. When we cancel, we do it without shame. Some progress is easy to measure. She can stand longer between the bars. She can feel more of her shins. She can brake smoother on downhill streets. Other progress sits in places charts don't track. The way she no longer apologizes for asking to sit. The way she leaves a room when someone calls her dramatic and doesn't turn herself into an explanation on the way out. Every once in a while Janelle's letter surfaces in the drawer where we keep the documents that name the past. We don't reread it much. The apology did its job. The boundary does the rest. Her parents live far away in a story we don't manage. We mark the anniversary of the fall by doing something small that feels large. Last week it was a walk to the corner and back, braces on, crutches steady, a rhythm you could set a poem to. At the curb, Ava stopped and looked down the block like it belonged to her. "Validation comes from inside," she said lightly, as if reciting a recipe someone finally taught her correctly. "If I wait for permission, I'll outlive the day." Healing hasn't been a line. It's been a spiral that returns to familiar rooms and finds the furniture rearranged. We are stronger in places we didn't ask to be. The fracture is part of the structure now, and when I hold her at night, I can feel the hardware beneath my palm, not as a reminder of ruin, but as proof that repairs hold.